London lay restless beneath a moon the color of ash, its lamplight dimmed by a shroud of fog that rolled in from the Thames like some patient predator. The clock of St. Paul's told midnight, and the sound seemed to linger too long, as though the air itself feared to let it go. In Baker Street, Sherlock Holmes sat in a high-backed chair, pipe in hand, his eyes fixed not on me, nor the fire, but on the shadow pooling in the farthest corner of the room. I had known him to stare in thought before, but never at a space so empty, and never for so long. "Watson," he said finally, his voice low, almost reverent. "Do you see it?" I followed his gaze. There was nothing, and yet, there was something. The fire's glow seemed to recoil from that corner. My skin prickled. Before I could speak, the door to our rooms swung open of its own accord, without a creak, without a breath of wind. A woman stepped in. No, glided in. Her face veiled in black lace, her gloves damp as though she'd crossed a river to reach us. Her scent was of grave soil and lavender. "Mr. Holmes," she whispered, though her lips did not move. "It has come again, and this time, it will not be satisfied with merely the young." The gaslight flickered violently. The shadow in the corner seemed to lean forward. Holmes rose, and for the first time in my years with him, I saw hesitation in his movements. "Mrs. Armitage," he said, as though tasting the name for the first time in years. "I had hoped your village was done with its curse." Her eyes flashed through the veil, gray, and far too wide. "A curse does not end, Mr. Holmes. It waits. It remembers." Outside, the sound of hooves clattered against the cobblestones, though no carriage passed. A child's laughter echoed faintly, carried on the fog, and was swallowed by the night. Holmes turned to me. "Fetch your revolver, Watson. And bring a lantern. We go where even the police dare not tread." And thus began the case a case that would bind our names to whispers in the East End for decades to come. The fog seemed thicker now, pressing against the windows like the breath of some great beast. I loaded my revolver with fingers less steady than I cared to admit, while Holmes retrieved a small leather case from the mantel, its latch etched with strange, curling runes I had never seen before. Mrs. Armitage watched, unmoving. The lace of her veil quivered slightly, though not from any draught. "It feeds," she murmured, "when the moon wanes to its thinnest, and the wind dies. But this time, it stirs sooner. Someone has called to it." Holmes paused, his keen eyes narrowing. "Called to it?" His tone was dangerous, probing. "Then it is not merely a phantom of the marsh. It is bound to a will." She nodded once, the gesture slow, deliberate. An oath was made, and a debt must be paid. We stepped into the night, the fog curling greedily around our ankles. Each step toward the East End felt like a descent. The gas lamps were fewer here, and those that remained burned low, as though unwilling to illuminate what lay ahead. We passed shuttered shops with windows scratched by something far sharper than glass cutters, and once, a doorway marked with a circle of salt, broken cleanly in two. Holmes led us down a narrow alley where the cobbles were slick, though no rain had fallen. At its end stood a door, painted black, with no handle. The air was cold enough to bite. Holmes rapped once, twice, thrice. The sound was swallowed instantly. The door swung open, revealing a long hall lit only by candles guttering in green glass. At the far end, a figure waited, tall, thin, and dressed as though he'd stepped from another century entirely. His smile was small, sharp, and knowing. "Sherlock Holmes," he said softly. "I have been expecting you." The man's voice carried the weight of an old cathedral, measured, resonant, and dusted with centuries of dust. He beckoned us forward, and the door closed behind us with the quiet inevitability of a coffin lid. Holmes's gaze flickered over the room, taking in every detail. The way the candle flames bent toward the figure, as if drawn by unseen threads. The faint, rhythmic scratching from beyond the walls. The air, tinged with iron and something sweeter, too sweet. "You've led us a winding chase," Holmes said, his voice clipped. "What name do you answer to, sir?" The man's smile deepened, showing teeth that caught the green candlelight in a way no natural enamel could. "Names are shackles, Mr. Holmes. But you may call me Barrow." He turned and glided down the hall, his shadow moving a half-step slower than his body. We followed into a chamber lined with shelves, not of books, but of jars. Each jar held a single object suspended in a viscous, amber fluid. A child's shoe, a wedding ring, a cracked pocket watch, a shriveled black feather. Each jar bore a small brass plate engraved with a date and a name. "Trophies?" I asked, my voice harsher than I intended. "Memories," Barrow replied without turning. Every debt leaves its relic. Mrs. Armitage stepped forward, her voice trembling. Barrow, the thing in the fog is stirring. You swore it would sleep until the tide was right. Barrow's eyes gleamed. It should have, unless someone has been feeding it. He turned sharply to face us. And it has been feeding well. Holmes's hand tightened on his cane. You mean to say there is another party involved? Barrow tilted his head. No, Mr. Holmes. I mean to say that your arrival has awakened its hunger. From somewhere deep within the fog-wrapped streets, there came a sound like the slow tearing of cloth, followed by a scream cut short. The scream dissolved into the night, leaving only the sound of our breathing, and that low, dragging noise, like something heavy being pulled over cobblestones. Holmes's eyes locked with mine, then shifted to Barrow. Tell me what it is we're dealing with. All of it. Barrow's expression was almost pitying. It is older than your city, older than your kingdom. We call it the lurker in the breath. A shadow born when the first fires guttered and the cold crept back in. It does not kill for sustenance. It kills to be remembered. He moved to a tall cabinet at the far wall. With deliberate care, he withdrew a glass vessel, inside which coiled a fragment of fog, turning, folding upon itself as though alive. Even through the glass, it chilled the air. This, Barrow said, was taken the last time it rose. 1843. A village in the marshlands, gone in a night. Every living soul drawn into the mist, their bodies found days later, skin like parchment, eyes wide, mouths blackened with frost. Mrs. Armitage's hands clenched in her gloves. You told me it could be bound. That the chain would hold until the tide and the moon aligned again. Barrow's gaze slid to her. And so it would have, had it not been called. There is a pattern to its hunger. A summoning. Someone has traced the old lines in the stones again. Holmes leaned forward, his voice sharp. Where? Barrow's lips curled. Whitechapel. Under the viaduct. There are symbols you will not wish to see. Before I could speak, the jar in Barrow's hands shuddered violently. The fog within surged, pressing against the glass, forming what might have been the outline of a hand. A whisper leaked from it, low, pleading, and impossibly close to my ear. Watson. Holmes's tone was urgent now. Do not answer it. For a moment, the air in the chamber felt thinner, as though the thing in the jar had stolen it all away. And from beyond the walls, that dragging sound came again, closer, deliberate, patient. The decision was wordless. Holmes snapped shut his coat. Barrow replaced the trembling jar into its cabinet, and Mrs. Armitage drew her veil tighter. We stepped once more into the streets, the fog curling in thick, deliberate coils as if guiding us. The route to the viaduct wound through alleys that seemed narrower than I remembered, the buildings leaning close as though listening. The further east we went, the more the sounds of the city fell away. No footsteps but ours, no distant carriages, no stray bark of a dog. Only the faint hiss of the fog against the stone. When we reached the arches of the viaduct, I felt the temperature plummet. Moss slicked the bricks, and strange black stains dripped from the mortar in thin, winding lines. Beneath the central arch, the ground was bare cobble, save for the markings. They sprawled across the stones in a pattern that seemed to swim if you looked at it too long. Symbols burned into the surface, their edges still glowing faintly, as though they'd been carved by heated iron mere minutes before. Between them lay small offerings, teeth, coins worn smooth, fragments of bone. Holmes crouched, tracing one sigil without touching it. Pre-Roman, he murmured. This is older than the city itself. His eyes flicked to Barrow. And yet you recognize them. Barrow's shadow stretched unnaturally far under the flickering lamplight. I have used them in other centuries. They open the way. Or close it, if you know the order. Mrs. Armitage shuddered. Then close it. Now. From somewhere within the tunnel, a faint light began to bloom, greenish, pulsing, like the glow of deep-sea creatures. With it came the sound of breath, long, rattling, too deep for any human lung. Holmes rose slowly, his voice low and cold. It's already here. The light brightened, casting warped silhouettes on the brick walls. One of them, impossibly tall, with too many joints, moved against the others. And in that moment, I knew the fog was not the lurker's shroud. It was its body. The glow surged forward, and the fog moved with it, flowing like liquid shadow, filling every crack and seam of the viaduct. My lantern dimmed to a pale ember, as if the light were being drunk away. Barrow stepped back, muttering words in a language older than Latin, his voice like stones grinding under the tide. Holmes grabbed my shoulder, forcing me against the wall just as the first tendril coalesced. It brushed the cobblestones, leaving frost in its wake, then uncurled into a limb too thin to support itself, bending and reforming until it resembled an arm. Fingers, if they could be called that, dragged across the offerings on the ground, scattering bone and coin alike. Mrs. Armitage's breath came in sharp bursts. It knows we're here. It knows which of us called it. Holmes's voice was a razor. You? She shook her head violently, but her eyes flicked, just once, toward Barrow. The man's chanting faltered, and for a heartbeat, the lurker's head formed from the fog. A void in the shape of a skull, teeth made of shifting light, eyes deep as drowned wells. It inhaled, and the sound was like the sucking of the sea through broken pilings. Hold it, Holmes barked. He dropped to one knee, dragging a piece of chalk from his coat and sketching symbols into the stones, matching those carved into the ground but in a different sequence. Watson, keep the lantern high. The light flared as I lifted it, and for a moment the lurker recoiled, its form thinning, becoming a cloud once more. But in its place, shapes began to move within the fog, faces half-formed, mouths open in eternal screams, pressing against the veil like trapped souls desperate for release. If he fails, Barrow hissed, these will not remain faces. They will be us. The final sigil flared beneath Holmes's hand, and the ground shook. The offerings rattled, then shattered into dust. The lurker's form writhed, the green light guttering as though some unseen wind were tearing it apart. And then, from within its dissolving shape, a voice spoke. Not in words, but in the sound of my own heartbeat, quick and unsteady. The fog collapsed, leaving only the stillness of midnight and the echo of that impossible voice in my skull. The silence after the lurker's retreat was not relief. It was absence, a void in the air that felt more threatening than its presence had. The frost it left behind clung to the cobblestones, hissing softly as it met the damp night. Holmes remained crouched over the fading sigils, his eyes fixed not on the ground, but on the darkness beyond the viaduct. It isn't gone, he said finally. Merely folded away. His voice carried the quiet fury of a man who knows he has bought time, not victory. Barrow stood apart from us, his shadow still unnaturally long in the dim light. He was breathing hard, a predator's pant, but his smile had returned. Patience is the weapon of such things, he murmured, and the undoing of those who hunt them. Mrs. Armitage turned sharply toward him. This was your doing. You brought Holmes into it because you could not control it yourself. Her voice trembled, not from fear, but from rage. Barrow's eyes flickered with amusement. I brought him because I knew the lurker would follow the scent of his mind. It likes intelligence. It remembers it. Holmes rose, dusting his hands. Then it will remember all of us. Watson, we will need to prepare for the next attempt. It will not wait for the tide again. He turned to Mrs. Armitage, his gaze unreadable. And you will tell me the true extent of your dealings with this man. We left the viaduct in near silence, the streets still deserted, though I could not shake the sensation that the fog lingered just beyond sight, curling in doorways, watching. As we reached Baker Street, the gaslight in our sitting room guttered once, twice, then steadied. Holmes said nothing, but his jaw tightened. That night, I dreamt of the lurker's face forming again in the fog, but this time it was not Barrow it watched, nor Mrs. Armitage. It was me. And when I woke, my window was open, and the faintest trace of frost lay across my desk.